I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes now taking a closer look at the key challenges and ways forward which the XCOM has found through this process. A first overarching challenge is that not all tools are equally accessible to all vulnerable people and countries. Some require a certain level of liquidity or credit worthiness that some of the most vulnerable are not able to meet. For some countries, their level of debt or the interest rates associated with some tools are barriers to access. While at a local level, difficulties in long-term financial planning and the inability to build up savings are significant barriers. A second challenge is that no single instrument or tool, as Svenja said earlier, is able to address the whole range and scale of risks faced. This is of course true in all contexts. Note there's never going to be a single silver bullet. It would be useful to have further information about when to use particular financial instruments, including insurance, and when not to. In addition, as previous speakers have said, further information on the applicability of a given tool to slow onset events as opposed to extreme events would be useful. While insurance can be a valuable risk management tool, as we know, it isn't viable in all situations. A third challenge is that existing financial instruments and tools may be inadequate to address the full spectrum of losses and damages. Existing tools may fall short of generating financial resources at a scale sufficient to meet growing requirements as levels of exposure and vulnerability increase alongside the increase of climate impacts. Important gaps remain regarding instruments that could be applied in the context of slow onset events and for cases of non-economic loss and damage. Certain risk retention approaches may indeed be insufficiently funded to be effective. In this regard, further analysis may be useful for a better understanding of what kind of novel instruments could fill such gaps. A fourth challenge is that the risks posed by loss and damage may exceed national capacities to respond, and so further means of coordinating financially across countries and regions are needed. For example, regional risk pools. Now let me quickly touch on potential ways forward, which may point to how to manage climate risks effectively. The top four findings that we in the XCOM came away with based on the call for submissions was that first, first it's clear that there's a need for specific financial instruments and tools to reach the most vulnerable. Special attention for capacity building and instruments that enable the most vulnerable to partake. The integration of social protection schemes, DRR, climate change adaptation, may indeed improve the livelihoods of poor people, even as it addresses loss and damage risks. The second finding is that smart combinations and co-design of financial instruments and tools are more likely to incentivize comprehensive risk management than single silver bullet solutions. Effective climate risk management toolkits should be embedded in strategies for risk prevention, reduction, preparedness, response, and recovery. Another design consideration might be linking financing for disaster risk management and adaptation in such a way that financial instruments and tools for loss and damage risk can be integrated into national adaptation plans and other relevant processes. Finally, insurance premiums should reflect the underlying climate risks and be structured to promote loss prevention and loss reduction. And I understand that we'll be hearing more about a lot of these topics later in these 2 days. A third finding is that it is vital for policymakers to build an enabling environment for instruments and tools to be effectively deployed and to lay the foundation for the successful introduction or scaling up of financial instruments. A further enabling factor is the use of rigorous risk assessment and analysis as a prerequisite for using financial instruments and tools in the loss and damage risk context. An enabling environment is further supported through ongoing capacity building and donor engagement. Such activities help users to enhance their capacity to produce comprehensive risk management plans and integrate risk finance. The fourth finding is that public-private partnerships can enhance effectiveness of financial instruments. The role of the private sector in helping to protect the most vulnerable populations should, where appropriate, be complemented by public policies.